travel today, but I now call this meeting to order at 9:05 p.m. Roll call, please.
All right, Presidents Baker. Here. Wilrice.
Here.
Hansen.
Here.
Weiss. Here. Jones. Here. Brown. That Brown. Oh. Lovett. Sid. Martel.
Proxy.
McMurtry.
Here.
Duncan.
Proxy.
Baker. First Senator.
Here.
Wilrice.
Nobody else is here.
Okay. Hansen's the proxy. Weiss.
I was almost about to ask what to say that.
Oh, right.
It's not proxy.
Jones.
Here.
Brown. Lovett. Okay. Sid.
Here.
Martel. McMurtry. Here. Duncan. Here. And Lee Buxley.
Cool. Meeting minutes from last time.
Motion.
We have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Whoa.
All those opposed? Okay, cool. Secretary announcements.
My first announcement is both of the Director of Technology and the Director of Election positions will be open for next semester. Hadi's going abroad, and our yes, and our current Director of Elections quit. So, well, so yes, both positions are available. Yeah, you can find more information on the SA website, and I'll be sending out information over the listserv. Regarding the teaching symposium, it's a symposium run by the Center of Teaching Excellence. I believe it's on January 17th. And what else?
Everyone is encouraged to go. It's like an afternoon event. They're bringing in speakers, I think, from like other schools, and it's going to be I think it's basically kind of like a kickoff event for the CT, so it'll be really interesting. And everyone's invited. I think there's free food.
Yeah, I'll be sending out the information in my next list of email. Did you have a question?
So yeah, would we be like learning teaching skills? Is that like?
I think it's more of just like a forum to talk about teaching excellence, and so obviously students are a part of that conversation. So I don't think it's just learning teaching skills. I think it's more like talking about what good teaching is.
Okay.
Okay. And then Brian, we're going to introduce a new constitution.
So, how do you pull up the presentation? You guys want to come up? Nathan.
Yeah. Do you want to go stand up? Or?
Yeah.
You want to take
Make
notes?
fun.
This is not as to you.
I think he's dressed up for something else.
Alright, so as a lot of you already know, because you've received a copy of the draft via email, our Committee on Constitutional Revisions has been working hard all semester and has now produced a draft of a proposed new constitution to replace the existing document. This is very much still a draft. There are problems with it, I guarantee it. So what we're doing now is presenting what we've done, kind of the major changes that we're recommending, and then we're opening it up between now and February 3rd, which is the last meeting to approve things for the ballot, and which is when I think we're planning on voting on this, to make revisions in the meantime. So there's a solid 2 months and some change to make changes to this. It's not perfect. Please let us know what your concerns are as early as possible so that we can get them fixed. We're happy to fix things. Basically, what we've done with this is the old document, a lot of the problems with it were because you have the Constitution and the bylaws were in separate places, and they would talk about each topic in each different place. Got really confusing. References to things that didn't actually exist, contradictions between the Constitution and the bylaws. So what we've gone through and done is moved everything by topic each article has a topic, and then within that, there's Class A and Class B. Think of Class A as the current constitution, think of Class B as the current bylaws. Class A is harder to amend, Class B is easier to amend. Class A talks more about general things, and Class B talks more about the specific procedures. We've also gone through and looked at old procedures, references to things that we don't do anymore, and updated those to be in line with current practice. And then where procedures were just not good, we've tried to improve them. So I guess now we want to go through each particular article and talk about the changes that we've made to each article. And we are going to open it up on each article for a discussion of what we've done with that.
So Article 1 is pretty short and simple, the name and purpose. For this, we didn't really make any major changes because, like you said, the point of us overhauling the Constitution was not to change like the direction or purpose of the essay, but rather just fix more of the problems with the document. That we moved the preamble to this article to make it easier to reference. We figured it worked in well, but the content as a whole was kept the same. For Article 2, as the membership and organization, we basically just wanted to clarify the roles of the different organizations and groups within the essay, like specify that the university courts or U courts role within the essay as the judicial branch is different from, or is distinct from its role that you probably normally think of it fulfilling the code of conduct. We clarified the relationship between the essay and the colleges because it was a bit confusing in the old document. The old document would separate the Honor Council for no good reason from other subsidiary organizations, at least within this article. So we got rid of that. We just removed other redundancies between this and other articles.
For those of you who have seen the Constitution, is there anything in here that you'd like to discuss? We can move on to definitions.
This is another really basic article. The title basically says it all. We just define terms that we use throughout the document, some of which weren't exactly clear. Like in the old document, we use the term open meetings a lot, but we never really defined it. So kind of terms like that. The difference between Class A and Class B for this article is defined in this, like Brian said before, and yeah.
Yeah, one of the big things with what we did is we tried to remove all of the instances where there's a term used and it doesn't really mean anything, so you're like, okay, what does that actually entail? In general, the spirit behind all the changes we've made is if it talks about a procedure, if it talks about something being done or needing to be done, it says how to do it.
Yeah, can I just add something? So I think the idea behind creating two different classes, for those of you who didn't get it the first time, is we used to have a constitution and bylaws, and because they were segmented. So you would have all the articles on like executive, legislative, judicial, like and so on for the Constitution, and then you would have the bylaws. So you would have to flip between like 10 pages of the document to get from one section to the other. What we've done is we've instead segmented this Constitution by topics. So now it's executive, and you have the essential Constitution bit, and then you have the bylaw bit, which is what we're calling Class A and Class B. So by doing this, we're just grouping things by topic, which will make things easier to understand and easier to find things and navigate through the document. So I guess moving on with the legislative part, I guess this is just a really brief summary. I just want to talk about here we're just pointing out the major changes and the major highlights that we've seen in the document. I highly encourage you guys to go through and read the document on your own because there are a lot of small nuances that I think do actually matter, and since we hope this Constitution will stay intact for a while, I think it's really important that, you guys have gotten an email to you for a reason. So So the legislative document, essentially what we want to do is we want to clarify the procedures with introducing reviewing and ratifying legislation. So what we have here is we've kind of defined the 3 different types of legislation that we're looking at. We've defined also who takes a part of the Senate. So we've kind of created a differentiation between the student association and voting Senate members. We've also defined what open, closed, special, and secret meetings are, and what the procedures are to create each of these.
What's
yes.
a secret meeting?
A secret meeting. Okay. There's no secret meeting. Special meetings. All right.
It's a closed meeting.
It's a closed meeting.
Basically, they're only, in practice, they're only done for like the award thing that we do in the spring. However, if there was some sensitive issue up for discussion, the Senate could vote to have a closed meeting, and then the records get sealed for 5 years on the assumption that most people are not here by the time the records are unsealed.
Yep, right. So for matters of privacy or for things that we don't want disclosed, we'll use closed secret. Okay, and then we have basically one voting member needs to be a participant in the introduction of all SA legislation. And then we have, we've also kind of removed and kept things up to date with current practice. So we've removed updated duties of the Senate, which in one section in the old Constitution was to approve clubs, which we now have a committee on club approvals for.
And
Are there any
now we
questions?
actually approve clubs.
Yeah. Great, awesome. So, surprised there are no questions about that. Next, we looked at the executive part of the Constitution. Here, we are just basically clarifying the responsibilities of each of the SA executives and officers. Primarily, we're really looking at the executive committee, which is basically the folks sitting up here, looking at the broad purpose of the position, and then we're clarifying the individual responsibilities of them in Class B. The old succession procedure says in the case that one of us die, someone new will take our spot. We thought that was hard.
It also did not handle anything less than death, really. So
And since I kind of want to live, we have kind of made things a little bit more broad. We've also specified the process for furthering, so we've added a new section that discusses the faculty and staff advisor. We've had Kate for a while, but when she moves on, there's a procedure now for replacing her. We have updated the tasks of the executives to reflect current practice, specifically that of the treasurer and the secretary have been expanded quite a bit to reflect changes in blanket tax procedures and also marketing procedures for what the SA does. And then we've clarified selection. We've actually added a whole new section on basically what university standing committee representatives do. They're a large part of the SA, and they weren't really previously addressed in the Constitution at all. So we've added that, and then we've also updated the director names and the roles to remove outdated director positions and added the new ones. So director of communications is now marketing. Director of technology now doesn't have to do stuff with the World Wide Web. They do stuff on the internet and with their website. So I mean, things have changed, so we've changed things accordingly. Are there any questions with that? All right, cool.
All right, so for judicial, right now the judicial procedure is that U-Court is the judicial branch of the student association. There are various disputes that may or may not be handled by the court that then makes a non-binding recommendation to the Senate on the basis of no criteria and on the basis of procedures that are not the ones that the court has for code of conduct proceedings, but then that are never specified in the document. So there are now a good 10 more pages in the document explaining how that works. So what types of cases get handled by the court? So that's interpreting the Constitution of the SA, the constitutions of subsidiary organizations, that's dealing with challenges to elections, that's dealing with challenges to Senate actions or other violations of the SA Constitution and bylaws, whether that's by the Senate or organizations or individuals. So all of these things that happen under our Constitution rather than under the Code of Student Conduct, there's now a way of dealing with that and clear standards for how decisions are supposed to look. And what's the basis for actually determining what happened and whether it's relevant under the SA Constitution. There are also now rules for what are appropriate grounds for impeachment. Previously, and actually currently, the Senate can impeach anyone for any reason, which is not clear at all. Also gone through and updated the language. It refers to no longer existing things right now. So yeah, again, a lot of the reason that the document is much longer now with what we're proposing than it was previously is because you have these dead spaces in the document where it's like, by the way, use this procedure, and then doesn't say what it is. Are there any questions about the judicial aspect?
Great, awesome. So for committees, essentially what we wanted to do here was break down the types of committees and what is needed to create or dissolute a committee, kind of what the committees do. So if you're a part of the SA Standing Student Life Committee, you are now officially in the Constitution. You weren't before. Many things have changed. So basically, yeah, I've already gone through them. Class A, we defined the different types of committees, standing and I think special committees. So we have basic standing committees that are those that are here to stay. They reflect a topic of interest or issue, like one of our academic standing committees, student life, or maybe like an elections committee, something that will happen year to year and needs to stay. We also have special committees that were basically combined or brought together for just a specific purpose. And then in Class B, we'll define, basically, Class A defines what the definitions of those committees are. Class B kind of defines what the current committees, like which ones are currently in practice. And then we've updated the responsibilities, basically who can serve as a member in each of these committees, and also kind of what the responsibilities of each of the committees are. We've expanded quite a few of the responsibilities of the Elections Committee. We've specifically kind of put like specific tasks for Brian and Nathan actually, and we've also brought light on some of the work that the Committee on Club Approvals does, which used to be kind of the responsibility of the Senate, but now we've moved it to them.
So with the Blanket Tax Committee, we've kind of discussed that before when we presented that chunk of the document, so we can skip over that unless there's any questions that you all want to discuss. We went through on the composition of the Committee on Constitutional Revisions. Basically how it used to be was it was me, Nathan, and then whoever wanted to join. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense, so we've more clearly tried to go through and see who would be useful to have as far as roles on that committee so that we can understand all the aspects that that committee might be dealing with. So we added a requirement that there be an exec, that there be a senator, that there be a president, a subsidiary organization officer, a standing committee chair, each of these roles in addition to the at-large members so that we can have a more representative committee, and that'll make the process a lot smoother since we were in communication with all of those groups anyway. And then the Future Alumni Committee will, right now it's just a section header, but it will eventually be in there before we present this again in the spring, ideally.
Yeah, Rachel.
So how many members are going to be, like, so if you're defining who's supposed to be in this committee, how many members is that going to be now?
So, hold on just a second. Other things the document has now, a table of contents.
Yeah, I mean, so essentially, when we were writing this, when we were revising this Constitution, we met with the groups of interest for each document. So I don't know whether the senators and presidents may remember, but I think the senators specifically, when we were writing the legislative part, we actually came to your dinner and we were like talking about some of the nuances of the wording and changing some of the sections with you guys there. So I mean, this is something we like to continue in the future, is having people who are interested specifically in each of the topics be a part of this committee.
Would it be applied in that way, where you come to our senator dinners, or is it like so-and-so is the senator on this project?
Someone would be specifically on the committee. So the committee, the way it's written in this proposed constitution, has 8 members at minimum. Most of those are flexible, so if there were 3 senators who were interested, that could happen, but there should be at least 1 senator so that there's someone in each of those meetings to provide that information. Because a lot of times, like, we know if we're going to discuss committees, hey, we should talk to the standing committee chairs, but other things come up in topics where you might not expect them to come up, where it's useful to have that perspective.
So hopefully this committee won't have to do much.
Yeah.
Nothing least major.
You don't have to use it for another 10 years, that would
yeah.
be great.
Yeah.
So with organizations, this article deals with both dependent and subsidiary organizations, mostly with dependent, which are your typical clubs that don't receive blanket tax. All that distinction has remained roughly the same. We've cleaned up the definition of subsidiary organizations to make it a little bit more clear, but it keeps the same organizations that were previously subsidiaries, and it's more a change of the logic of the document than of anything in practice. The process is a lot more streamlined right now, technically, and I've been largely ignoring this. I don't have to review a club's constitution until they've submitted all their forms, which is just an unnecessary roadblock waiting for a sponsor to submit a form when I could be reviewing the constitution, getting it back to the organization so that they can make any changes that need to be made. So a lot of the pointless procedural stops in the club approval process have been cut out. The need for Senate approval has been cut out unless the committee denies an application, in which case there's an appeal to the Senate. We've updated the policies. The non-discrimination policy was out of date with Rice's policy, and the anti-hazing policy was out of date with the Code of Student Conduct. And then previously it wasn't really clear what you would do if your faculty or staff sponsor left in the middle of the year, because you're supposed to have someone who's going to be there for the full year, but sometimes faculty members end up unexpectedly leaving, whether they get a fellowship or something else. So there's now a way to do that. And then it's more clear now in our document, it's always kind of been clear on the student activities end, that if you don't renew your registration, you cease to be an organization from the standpoint of the SA. Are there any questions on that? Okay, subsidiary organizations. Most of this we've already gone through, but
What a subsidiary organization means.
so a subsidiary organization is all organizations that receive blanket tax funding except for the SA, because the SA can't be a subsidiary of itself, even though it has been for a long time. And then U-Court and Honor Council, because they're fundamental to the student governance system as like part of the judicial process, are always subsidiary organizations, regardless of whether they receive blanket tax funding. And that just, it kind of gives us a little bit more control in the sense of having to approve their constitutions. Doesn't really apply a whole lot because the U-Court Constitution already requires student body approval, and the Honor Council Constitution is separate from ours and is not subordinate to ours. But it removes a lot of the restrictions that are placed on dependent organizations. There's shortcuts for subsidiary organizations because they have advisors to go through, and it's not always necessary for them to go through our processes. And then we've added protections on where the SA's governance lies, which is basically in making sure that student money is being used for the intended purpose and that students are getting something out of that, and where the organizations have leeway. So they're now able to fill vacancies in their positions without having to come before us and then tell us who to put in the position, and then the Senate pretends to nominate them and vote on it. And they're now, we can't just impeach them because we don't like the content of the thresher, which is ridiculous because if the thresher's doing its job and we're not doing ours, we shouldn't like the content of the thresher. Candidacy requirements for elected positions, we've kept the basic idea that you have to have a leader or representatives elected if you're a subsidiary organization. We've updated the requirements to actually be in line with what each organization has, so the Director of Elections can more easily go through and verify candidates' eligibility for those positions. Any questions? All right. Blanket tax, we've gone through all of this, just clarifying the review process and making sure that there is a way of doing things, that there's clear outcomes that the committee can select at each point, and that there has to be a written report explaining the findings. The organization has an opportunity to respond, all that fun stuff. And then if we want to move on to initiatives and referenda.
Alright, so you guys probably didn't know about this, but these things actually exist, initiative referenda. And an important thing that we did with going through the Constitution this time around is if a student gets a petition, gets all the signatures and go through the procedure to get an initiative or referenda on the ballot, if it's time sensitive or like it's an initiative to remove elected officer like of the student association from a position, that will actually like warrant a special election now, rather than like before. There wasn't really any procedure for handling initiative referenda except for like just putting them on the general ballot. So like if you wanted to remove someone for like prep practices, so like you want to remove Michael Pan because he keeps on getting egg rolls all the time, and this is time sensitive. You want to do it, but like you can't do it until the general ballot in the spring, and then
When he's already out the door
yeah,
anyway.
and then he's already out the door anyway. So like that doesn't accomplish anything. No, I'm just kidding. And also, again, there wasn't really any like the procedures for initiative referenda weren't really clear at all in the last document. So we kind of like outlined them in a consistent fashion. Also, we place safeguards to make sure that like I'm properly designed as far as like contradictory to our Constitution, are properly supported as far as like someone say they have all these signatures, but really they just like forged them all. We have safeguards against that, and yeah, those are the major.
Yeah, one of the other important changes that we made is we set out a procedure for getting the ballot language of the initiative approved. That was an issue last year with Reset as far as students being confused by what exactly they were voting for. So it's now more clear that the ballot has to say, if you vote yes, this is what you're asking us to do. If you vote no, this is what you're asking for. And then it allows, in the case that there might be a preferential voting initiative, so if we're trying to allocate $50,000 and there's 5 suggested projects, you rank those projects. That's something that fits with the procedure now, although it's not required that everything has more than 2 options. Most things are still going to be, yes, I agree, no, I don't agree. Elections.
Alright, so the major thing that we did with this article regarding elections is just ensure that the procedures were clear. As you might know from like past elections, there will occasionally be issues regarding unclear election procedures, and I think we managed to clear up a lot of those and ensure transparent elections. Through making sure that like everyone who's on the ballot, like all their names become public record. Is like as soon as they become candidates, the results of elections are ensured to be matters of public record. For the most part, as far as like regulations and procedures, there weren't too many major changes. We've kept most of those basically the same. We've just clarified a lot of what was demanded to make sure to like avoid any fiascos with that. Like we clarified preferential voting and what that entails, because there was definitely an issue with that last year. Andrew taught on that now. Again, prevents against signature fraud. Like one of the things that we did throughout this document that was especially prevalent in the elections article is we avoided language that like placed demands on other organizations to do things just because we said so in our Constitution. Like we told the Thresher that they had to publish this stuff, which isn't really like
The best is
our
where
scope.
you can't have a special election until it's announced in the Thresher. So if the thresher chooses not to announce the special election, it can block it from happening because the deadline is tied to the date of announcement.
Yeah. So we've gotten rid of all those things.
Yeah.
We specify the rules of like if a violation is committed on behalf of like an organization or a candidate, we specify the rules as far as like how that's handled and like determining whether the candidate or the organization, if they were actually responsible, if they knew about that violation, that it was going to occur. Establishing clear procedures for filling vacancies, et cetera, yeah. So again, mostly just clarifying the currently standing procedures and making sure that they actually like work in practice. And again, ensuring transparency throughout the whole thing.
Yeah, like with the whole RPC fiasco last year with the sending emails, a lot of what we've done with the campaign rules is make it more clear that that applies not just to candidates for the people positions, but also if you are campaigning for an initiative or a referendum, you're still bound by those rules, and it's the same rules. And then how that actually is interpreted as far as like, okay, if this person sent an email, what do we then do with that? Are there any questions on the election stuff?
Great. All right. So moving on to general policies and regulations. This is just really just kind of housekeeping stuff. Here we've kind of outlined, again, we've restated our non-discrimination and anti-hazing policies. We've also defined conflict of interest and how we go about addressing them, and we've also stipulated that no person in the SA or a member of the SA can make a contract on behalf of the SA without approval of the Senate and also of the executive committee prior to making the contract. Really easy. Are there any questions? I think we can move on. Right. Okay. So, so amendments is the last one, I think. Here we're looking at establishing basically a procedure for proposing and ratifying new amendments to this Constitution. Essentially, we've kind of clarified some of the voting procedures and basically who votes, whether it's the Senate or the Student Association, the whole body of students here that needs to vote. And this depends whether it's a Class A or Class B amendment. Class A is kind of harder to do. You need a Student Association vote for that. For Class B amendments, I think it's just the Senate. We've also set a time frame for the implementation of these amendments. We've given it a time frame of 5 days. However, if it's not possible in the time period, I think the parliamentarian has the authority to make an exception and establish a grace period for the implementation of this amendment. Otherwise, we've established a process for ratifying a new constitution in replacement of existing constitution bylaws.
Yeah, so the way the ratification would work for this is it would come up for a Senate vote to put it on the ballot, and then it would go as a referendum on the ballot. It would require a 2/3 vote, 20% turnout, and then it would be effective at the start of the next legislative session. So rather than interrupting right now and changing the procedures, we would be changing the procedures when the new officers came in and when we had changeover. And then one of the concerns we heard from subsidiary and dependent organizations was that their constitutions are going to be affected by this since the requirements have changed slightly for how they do business, and then there's also some loosening of requirements so that they can create procedures for things that we now allow them to have procedures for rather than forcing it to be done through the Senate. So that they're going to have, in the case of dependent organizations, they have to update their constitutions with a couple of minor changes when they re-register for next year, since clubs have to register every year anyway, and submitting their constitution is part of that process. Since subsidiary organization constitutions are often harder to amend, we're giving them until, I believe it's the end of the fall semester to propose the changes, and then they have until the general election when they get voted on to make the changes in the case of organizations that need general election approval.
Just for quick clarification. Will the Constitution be voted on by, like, article by article, or will it be voted on as an entire document?
So, the spirit of what we've done here and what we're recommending is that the old document is unusable and that this document is a significant improvement. So basically the question that we're asking is this constitution better than the constitution and bylaws we have now? If so, vote yes. If no, vote no. So
It'll essentially be
we're
like
putting it forward
ratifying
as a complete document, as ratifying this in replacement of what we have. So the amendment, in other words, is delete everything it says now and insert everything that this says. Any other questions on ratification or anything like that? Okay. So basically, the current document is, for any of you who've read it, it's pretty clearly a train wreck on a lot of levels. It hasn't even been copy edited in years. The new document, we've tried to make a lot more user-friendly as far as the formatting is consistent with like each level of indentation is consistent throughout the document rather than having like 3 font changes and different paragraph spacing and stuff all over the place. There's an article that goes section 12312 right now. And so the table of contents, when we PDF it, should link to the heading that you're looking for. So rather than having to go scrolling through all the pages, you can search the document easily and you can click to what you're actually trying to find, which should be fairly straightforward since we've tried to keep informative titles throughout and everything organized by topic. So if you want to read about elections, you go to the article on elections and it has everything you need unless there's something that just has to be covered elsewhere, in which case it tells you exactly where to go. The section numbers are carried through to each paragraph, so it's much more clear what you're referring to. If you want to refer to a particular section, you can just look at what you're reading rather than trying to have to scroll up 10 pages to figure out where you are in the document. You shouldn't end up in any dead ends anymore where it says, okay, see this section, which then refers you to that section, which then refers you to the election code of conduct, which doesn't exist. And then just like a lot of, on the procedural end, we've mostly kept things the same. What we've done in general, where we have changed things, it has been in an effort to remove red tape and to remove pointless bureaucracy. So we don't have to have silly procedural votes like, let's approve this list of already approved clubs.
Yeah, are there any questions over anything that we've talked about today? All right, so I guess the last thing I want to say is that we have done, so BCB6, or actually B Baron is the email you want to send all edits to. I just want to reiterate, just like definitely read over the Constitution. At least like read over the parts that are relevant to you. I think we've done a lot of changes to this Constitution. I think what we've done is to keep your roles and your responsibilities in the spirit of what you do. But I think if you're a president, if you're a senator, if you're NSR, read over the committees if you're NSR. Read over the legislation part if you're a senator, so you understand kind of the processes. I think this will help you do your job. But also, you can bring up edits if this is not right. You should definitely bring that up to us, because the stuff that is written here is definitely going to impact kind of the people who follow you. So I mean, I think we want to keep this in the spirit of what your jobs are supposed to be. And for that, we kind of need your help. So I mean, at the very least, read the parts that are relevant to you. If you're part of the Thresher, if you're part of the Honor Council, read the subsidiary organizations. I think it'll help a lot.
Yeah, with edits, if you want the most recent copy as a Word document, I will be happy to send it to you. I would put it in Google Documents, but it ate all the formatting and it makes a complete mess out of it, so we're not doing that. But I will give it to you in Word. You can make comments, do track changes, or you can just send me general thoughts. Whatever you want to do for the concerns or suggestions that you have works for me. I will work with you to try to get this document to be as good as it can be so that we don't have to go through this mess like repeatedly every few years when we find problems with it. Ideally, this should last and should be flexible for when we change procedures to have a way to change them without just making contradictory messes. Throughout this whole process, basically until it's ratified or not ratified, we will have the most recent version online so that you can refer to that because we'll be updating it periodically. generally if I go in to fix one thing, I see something else that's like a typo or whatever and end up fixing that too. So I will keep it updated every time I make revisions. Thank you.
Just a point, we introduced legislation 2 weeks ago about international student liaisons at OE. We are not going to be voting on that today because we still have some meetings with OISS to go through. So we'll be voting on that next semester. And now the homecoming committee chair is here to present this homecoming cup to the winning college.
All right, hi guys. So I came here before, obviously. I'm Charlotte Larson. I'm the committee chair for this year's homecoming celebration. And I want to start off by thanking all of you guys for all of your hard work. I know the presidents and senators had a big impact at their colleges with promoting homecoming, and I really appreciate it. I think it went super well. If you guys have any thoughts about how the week went, any questions, any feedback, feel free to email me at crl6@rice.edu.com. I mean, .edu, not .com. Sorry, it's been a long day. But we're hoping to have a more formal method of feedback. We haven't quite solidified that yet, but I will let you guys know when we do. But in the meantime, if you have anything you want to say, email me. And so, at this point, it is my honor to present the Homecoming Cup to the college that earned the most points throughout the competition. And the winner of this year's Homecoming Cup is Jones College! Yeah, good job. Congratulations, Jones. Duncan came in second place and Brown came in third. I don't know the exact point breakdown right now, but thank you all for all your effort. You're all winners in my eyes.
So quick announcement, this Saturday, if you haven't heard, is the Conference USA Football Championship. This is the first time we're going to the championship game, and it's being hosted at Rice, which is awesome. The game starts at 11 a.m. and there's a tailgate from 8 to 11. We have 8 a.m. Yeah, it's going to be really exciting. And so we had some donors, so actually, you know how student tickets are usually free? They're not free for conference games, and so we were supposed to pay $15 for them, but donors have been buying tickets for students, and so they have at least 1,000, maybe more free tickets for students if you get there in the morning of the game, so you go and pick up a ticket. And if they run out of tickets, you can buy them for $5 after kickoff. And then if you want to pre-order a ticket for some reason because you're scared they're going to run out, you can get it for $15. I don't know. And the other thing is we just met with H&D and they're actually going to have food out at the tailgate from 9 to 11 a.m. So the servers will be open and there'll be a small breakfast there, but if you want to just go out there and have some food with your beer, that'll all be there. So morning drinking, y'all. So yeah, get all your friends out, encourage everyone to go. This is a huge game. It's being broadcast on ESPN2, so we want a lot of people there in the crowds, or else it's really lame and sad. Even though it's gonna be 40 degrees. Oh, whatever. All right, any other announcements? Robbie.
So on a much more exciting note, just kidding, I love Rice sports. We have petitions going out. If you haven't seen the petitions, they're really cool. I spent a long weekend making the Google Doc Drive thing for it. There's currently one out about Sunday morning breakfast, if you're interested in that type of thing. Well, I guess that's not Sunday morning, but anyways, it's really exciting. But if all the senators want to come and get the posters, I made 220 copies.
Cool. Do we have a motion to adjourn? All